I think there even is a practical political implication of this statement, which is a harder thing to bring up in circumstances where there's so much gratitude we should show to the people who are defending us in this way, and so much praise that should be heaped on them for pulling off marvels that bring glory to the name of Hashem's people throughout the world and all of that. And that is that while it's the case that whether, in going after the Munich guys or kidnapping Eichmann, everything that Mossad and Tzahal did that's amazing, Entebbe, right? All of these amazing operations that no one ever thought possible, and we did it, and we dazzled the world, and even many people, were still willing to say at some point, yes, it's true that Israel is dazzling or Mossad is dazzling or whatever, but also it's true that the might of Hashem is like nothing else, and we should be grateful to Him. With all of that being said, I think it's less often said that maybe the obsession with our technical capabilities with regard to these kinds of things, that becomes part of the culture, has a way of systematically pushing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's role to the margins, as we said, but in a way that has really a practical downside, which, if you want, you could think of as HaKadosh Baruch Hu's way of expressing a bit of disapproval for the attitude. But it also is just quite logical if you examine the question a bit critically and say, what is the pattern here with Eichmann, with Operation Wrath of God, somewhat ironically named given the dyadic tension between acknowledging the role of God and the need for technical human prowess that we've been talking about. But in other words, the assassination of all the Munich planners, or with Entebbe, or with what's been happening recently with Hezbollah, the assassination of Hania in Iran, etc., or Fuad Shukr in Beirut. What all these things have in common is that they're responsive, they're reactive, they're vengeful, or they are about righting the wrong and balancing the scales. And that posture and that approach is what is repeatedly the theme in it's hard to generalize and say everything that is like this that Mossad ever does that everyone marvels at or whatever else, but it's really a consistent theme throughout most of what you can think of, and there's a clear ideological reason for that at the end of the day, which is that organizations like this, in a sense, end up existing in order to keep things from happening preemptively, or to vengefully strike back when somehow they are allowed to happen, when even though we didn't want them to, but they don't produce a positive vision for what we should be trying to create in the world and effect and bring about, right? Like there isn't a whole Torah of what you do on a good day when you're Mossad assassins. You're just sort of waiting there to stop the bad guys from getting to you or to go after them when they do. But if that's the whole ethos of the state, if the state only exists in a sense to prevent bad things and avenge the bad things that are not prevented, then it turns out there's kind of a treading of water that goes on that ultimately can't keep things totally afloat. And I think we saw that, for example, at the start of the war on Shmini Atzeret on October 7th of last year, where And people have already kind of marveled at this in a different and somewhat more critical or bemused way, that the same security establishment that can do these amazing things, like what was just accomplished in Beirut, or more, less recently in Tehran, that same establishment also allowed the attacks on October 7th to happen, right? And one is inextricably linked to the other, because when you are in a posture where you say your job is to keep things on an even keel so that nothing gets through, but that once nothing's getting through, there is no justification for something that could be called aggression, or for something that could be called a kind of positive vision of what to bring about that is going to be insisted on and imposed. And instead, it's just kind of supposed to be this iron and impenetrable wall. That kind of a system inevitably has these failure points, inevitably has imperfections, and it's going to put you in this mode of usually succeeding in preventing things, every so often having a catastrophic failure, then something terrible happens, and then you have to really go out and avenge it, and you successfully avenge it, and then the cycle resets, and it just goes on like that, right? Because it's not transforming the world or even transforming the security situation. And in fact, the same people who are ingenious about doing this vengeance stuff are also, as it turns out, when they're consulted, in news show panels and things, they're often of a mindset of, well, we're sort of responsible for kind of like managing the situation with our enemies, for turning the knobs and making sure the system doesn't get too, out of line. And then, we understand what, the goal here is. And if the goal is, peace and quiet and stability, then, really we need to do things like let them come and cross the border and work in our towns sometimes, and all these other things where, before you know it, security, like real security, ends up being sacrificed for the sake of other ideas that are what leaches into the mindset when there's this vacuum of a positive vision for what one's supposed to be doing. And so I think, as much as it's the case, again, that the might and the ingenuity and the pizzazz, for lack of a better word, of the various agencies and units, et cetera, that keep this country safe, demonstrate, and have demonstrated for decades of history of Medinat Yisrael, as much as all of that is to be appreciated and is to be praised and is to be celebrated, it's also the case that at some level, in this current moment, it might be fair to call what's been happening in Beirut a kind of redemptive swan song for that mindset as the reigning ethos governing national security and policy about our interactions with our enemies. Because as much as it is the case that Medinat Yisrael really got back some of its pride, not just in the last couple of days, but in the last few months, and that's very important, not just for our own feelings, but also for bringing honor back to the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because ultimately what happens to us is a matter of his reputation as well. And the greatest anguish that is implicit in all of the horrors that are visited on Am Yisrael, at some level, obviously at a very abstract level. We're not talking about the anguish of individuals, but when we talk, at a national level, whether you're talking about the Shoah, whether you're talking about October 7th, the idea that Hashem's people could be thrown down in such misery and victimhood and humiliation and defeat and suffering and all of these things, that is a Chilul Hashem of the highest order. It is a desecration of the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's put his name on us. And so it's very painful to see that desecration persist. And it is very much a cause for celebration when that desecration is lifted or removed, and we can, restore Hashem's name to its proper place. So it's as much as it's the case that these recent events accomplish that, and they give some redemption to the ethos of the historically either preventative or vengeful security apparatus in Medinat Israel. It's also the case that if we are a little bit thoughtful in understanding the origins of the events of the last year and trying to make sense of them, that it's clear that it can't go on like this. It's clear that saying that because a bunch of beepers exploded in Beirut, and now we've shown the world again that we're, back on top, that we have unimaginable capability in our mighty hands, and that we can do it, and they should all be afraid of us again. That in the short term, that's great, and in the long term, that will lead to more October 7th ad infinitum, because if we put our trust in our own powers and our own technologies and our own capabilities, we've already seen where that leads because of the complacency that sets in, because of the ideological vacuum that allows invasion by mentalities that ultimately run counter to security, and a whole host of other reasons. For as much as it's the case that sometimes these elaborate and amazing and ingenious operations succeed when Hashem lets them succeed, sometimes he lets things that are elaborate and ingenious and complex catastrophically fail, as happened when many vulnerabilities in the system in place around Gaza were exposed at the start of the war. And so, while it's the case, again, that we acknowledge the good, that we're very grateful for it, to the people who do these things, to the members of Am Yisrael that are keeping us safe and fighting for us, and we're also grateful to Hashem that he lets them succeed. We are at a juncture where the nation has an opportunity to recognize that ethos has to evolve, and it needs to evolve in a direction of having a positive vision for what this place has to become, such that it can start to transform the whole world through its example and through its message, and not just fortify itself against people who will never accept our existence here. The Torah is not just a suggestion that Jews who are blank slates and have no particular job or definition, but after wandering the world and being persecuted for a while, they need a safe haven. And so the land of Israel is supposed to be that safe haven. So everyone go back to the land of Israel, and you'll be constantly attacked there, but sort of usually safe, except when there are some catastrophic failures. But then you can get really marvelous revenge. That isn't how the Torah talks about the ideal of what we're supposed to be doing. The ideal of what we're supposed to be doing is that Hashem gives us this land with conditions on how we're meant to use it, that we're meant to use it to set a certain kind of example for the world and how our society operates, and to use it as a launch pad for the spreading of ideas that are meant to help all of humanity figure out better how to treat each other with justice and kindness, and how to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with a sense of, elevation of human dignity in purity and piety and all of those things, right? And so in order to accomplish that, one can't be content with simply saying, well, there are a whole bunch of people here who want to murder us, but if we are technically sophisticated, then we can make it impossible for them to wiggle their fingers enough to actually do it. So it's fine if they want to do it, but we won't let them because we're technical geniuses. And then we'll do whatever we want once we, make it so that they are sufficiently restricted in their ability to express those desires. Then we'll be safe and our safe haven will work. And then within that safe haven, it doesn't matter what we do. Now it's just for us to sort of have fun and figure out what we want to do with the infinite freedom that we have. It's not actually a winning formula. And what instead is the winning formula for Am Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael is still one with tremendous freedom. It's still one with tremendous flexibility for individuals to pursue their unique purpose in the world and figure that out. But that's as being part of a nation that does have a Torah that is a guiding light for how it organizes itself. And most importantly, perhaps to this discussion, a Torah that is a guiding light for how to deal with enemies on our borders and how to deal with matters of national security. And that would change things significantly because we would no longer be saying, okay, let's just wait until somehow you manage to, one of the punches manages to land, and then we'll go do another Operation Wrath of God. We'll do another, amazing exploding beeper shots after absorbing 11 months of thousands of rockets that have killed dozens of our citizens. And then we finally, fight back, right? That instead of that being the posture, that there are other postures that would make the enemy much more afraid of what they could stand to lose if they do much less to us. But having the confidence to act in that way doesn't come, as it turns out, from just trying to keep things on an even keel. It comes from understanding that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with you and that your success isn't only a matter of what's technically feasible. In fact, it might sometimes be a success you can achieve despite what seems to be technically feasible if you have Hashem with you, because you're doing the right thing according to his Torah, which might mean trying to conquer land and to settle it and to turn it into a place that is a safe place to have a Jewish community, right? Which in earlier periods during the history of the State of Israel was even something that the more secular-leaning leaders of the country who founded the modern state were willing to admit was part of the program and a necessary part of the program for security, right? And that has been to a significant extent lost in the mindset of the security establishment that we've been discussing, and a restoration of that idea, and really even a supercharging of that idea along the lines of what we understand from the Torah and what we understand from halakha. Those are things that really could have game-changing implications for the security dynamic in the region, and really would be, I think, and the Torah certainly states this, and in certain terms, would make the difference in shifting the balance from many of us fleeing from a few of our enemies to many of our enemies fleeing from a few of us. So it is a day to celebrate the great wisdom, or let's say craftsmanship and capability and craftiness and intelligence and ingenuity and might of our heroic fighters and defenders who struck at the enemy in a marvelous and dazzling way. And Bezrat Hashem, they should do it again and again until our enemies in Lebanon and everywhere else never think again of trying to wipe us off the map. But with all that being said, all of this success is a bracha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is backing that he's given to our efforts that he can withdraw, and that he sometimes has withdrawn in the past. And if we really want sustained backing from Borei Olam, from the creator of the world, then we need to think in terms of what he's taught us about how to succeed in an ultimate sense, according to the mission he's given us in this world that he made. And if we think more in those terms, and we start putting ourselves on footing that is less about a kind of hermetically sealed, technically ensured Pax Romana that puts the people trying to kill us in a straitjacket, that keeps us practically safe without changing anything about the way people think, then we're not going to succeed along those lines. And rather, instead, we need to develop an approach to the security of the country and an approach to the purpose of the country and its relationship to land and borders and the ultimate mission of Am Yisrael in this land, that will keep all of our enemies much more concerned about what they stand to lose if they do much less to us than they have already been willing to.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.